Professor Judges, I present to you Ottawa University, Kansas. The judges have read the question, and your time begins now.
Hello everybody, we are the Ottawa, Kansas PPE team. Our question today was whether or not CBI, or citizenship by investment, is basically a fair way to handle immigration. Now, I think most people have been victim to a fast pass situation in their lives where my example is I was at Worlds of Fun and I was like 10 and I have 8 siblings, so we did not get fast passes and I just had to watch everyone else skip me in line. And basically that is that fair in immigration policy? Like, should developed nations have the right to say you can buy your way into a faster citizenship? And basically our answer is yes. Philosophically, freedom of immigration is it's not going to have the principal agent problem if you align your goals as a nation with your goals as your citizens, and if you let your immigrants invest in your nation, then you're going to have a better outcome since their goals are aligned with yours. Politically, it's going to increase the social cohesion through trust as a nation, and economically, eager investors are a positive and they will strengthen our economic institutions.
One of the hallmarks of today's policy is that it presupposes the value of immigration, first of all, period. One of the philosophies which most defends immigration is known as libertarianism. It holds that immigration is necessary in a free society. In a liberal democracy like the United States, our freedoms are known as rights. If I were to ask what rights are most violated in a system of closed borders, the opposite, the most obvious example is an outsider's freedom of movement. However, that is only half the tyranny that would take place in this situation. The rights of insiders are also trampled upon in such a scenario. Consider an individual or business who wants to hire a worker from abroad. In a free, mutually beneficial exchange, something that our nation has been built on for 250 years. What right has the state to take this away? I argue that there is none. Now, some might say, Cole, we have to stop immigration to protect our culture. But that's actually where the philosophy of libertarianism is most strong. In America, what is our culture? Our culture is freedom itself. Protecting the freedom to travel and protecting the freedom of mutual exchange will only strengthen our culture, not diminish it. But when it comes to today's question in particular, one of the most complex issues about the morality of immigration is the criteria a state can permissively use to screen immigrants. And the advantage of a monetary investment criteria is that future citizens will have the health of their state in mind. In the same way that an investor into a business will only work to help the business he invests in, a future immigrant to the US, in this case, would, ceteris paribus, want to help the United States. Some might say that it would be wrong to allow the richer to have a preferable path, in this case, to buy citizenship. But the key strength of a policy like this, not weakness, would be that it would avoid any distinction based on culture or ethnicity, which are the more common types of discrimination and the more harmful types of discrimination in society. In a society like the US, one of the hallmarks of our political system is that it's not based on tribalism or ethnicism. In our system, ethnicity doesn't matter. Everybody gets the right to vote. At a time in the world when in the Balkans or in Czechoslovakia, nations break down into the core ethnicities, instead we remain united under a policy such as this. And the further political reasons to support this policy are next.
So there are significant political considerations when allowing CBI programs. However, we believe that the political incentives will outweigh the costs. Largely because, as the reader mentions, a big issue within immigration is the social cohesion and trust factor in countries where migrants and indigenous communities are interacting with each other. We believe that when you allow CBI programs for immigration, this increases trust from the home people with the migrants, because immigrants have proven now that they are invested into the U.S. through that fiscal donation or investment, stuff like that, right? So you know that when you see people coming into your country, you know that they are invested in the well-being of the country and the outcome, and not only just their well-being, but the well-being of the nation as a whole. Some people might say that this means that just anyone could buy their immigration into this country, and that would decrease trust because you don't know anything about them. But this policy is contingent on being accepted in the other processes of immigration, right? So passing those security checks, making sure that you know you're not a felon in another country, stuff like that. The general barriers that you face for immigration today would remain the same. You would still have to pass all of those, but you would simply be able to get priority by investing into the U.S. Next, we'll speak a little bit about the economic reasons why this is a good idea, and that would be easy.
Oh yeah, so economically, why wouldn't we want people to come in that are eager and wanting to help invest into our economy? So people that want to join their way in to start up their practices early or to strengthen our economy. Now the argument could be said, rich people could come in and influence the U.S. Through votes or influence our economy. Why wouldn't we want that to happen? We want these people to come in. If they have good ideas, they can pay their way in and they can help our economy grow. Cool.
Yeah, and jumping on to that, if rich people come and pay their way in, theoretically, one of the major counterpoints to allowing rich people to pay their way in is that it would result in a major power imbalance. So the poorer people who already live here would be, they would have less power than some of the more wealthy people who are coming in, because there's obviously going to be a wealth balance, so only the rich people are going to make their way in. Some scholars, Powell Clark and Norreste, did a study on the Jewish immigration to Israel in the 90s. And the conclusion of their study was this. This study finds that unrestricted mass migration from an origin country with inferior political and economic institutions coincided with the enhancement of the economic institutions in the destination country. We have reasonable confidence that rather than mere correlation, the mass migration helped to cause the improvement of economic institutions. And so what they found, that was in a study of mass migration where there was no limits, they found that not only were economic institutions not harmed, but they were actually improved. And I think that this is a good example to show that immigration of any kind does not actually harm economic institutions.
And in conclusion, politically, just to recap, this policy wouldn't diminish or water down American culture at all. It would embolden it politically. It's going to increase social cohesion and trust, and economically, it's going to strengthen our economic institutions. Thank you for your attention. I think we just passed minute 8 if anyone has any questions.
Very good. Can I ask the first question?
Yes.
In terms of economic, yes, this CBI, we look at a lot of positive investment from outside of the border. And would that grow to the stage, become a invasion, financial invasion or destruction to our economy? Would that be the case?
I don't believe so, because part of this immigration through investment policy, it's meaning that you're then going to participate in the American economy, right? So you wouldn't have people coming in, investing in the U.S. and then immediately pulling out funds, stuff like that, right? They're investing with the intention of becoming a contributing member of society, and therefore, their economic decisions will impact the rest of the U.S. It will help with the U.S.'s economic growth rather than the growth of everywhere else.
Can I ask a follow-up on that? Because your answer makes me think, yeah, if we have high net worth individuals, they already have a lot of money. They come in, what are they going to do? Are they really going to be productive? Or what are they gonna do? If they already have money.
I think one can make the argument that it might not actually matter much if they're productive because they've already paid that entrance fee. And the idea is that that entrance fee is going to go into the American economy and help provide for all of us. And so if they're willing to put in that initial payment, then they could just come in and sit on their, bums for all we care. They've already paid us the money.
So they're not gonna be productive.
Well, and additionally, you can look at like past examples of high net individuals coming into the US and see that they have been productive, right? A lot of our like industry leaders, I know he's a pretty controversial person right now at this time, but you can't deny the economic impact that Elon Musk has had on the US. And he came in as like a high net individual or high net worth individual.
And who should they pay the money to? When they invest here, do they give it to the federal government? Do they give it, what do they invest in?
I mean, that's an extremely important question. I think the key issue is that's a policy issue is we would all agree that having more money in our society is a good thing. But as to whether or not they will spend the money correctly, that's a whole other issue. But from a classical econ perspective, obviously there's things that are more productive or less productive in our society.
Yeah, I think that you would want to look not necessarily at an investment into the federal government, but investment into markets, right? So they would be paying investment fees into maybe the industries that they're going to work into industries that we feel like we need a national revival for. So things like maybe road infrastructure, stuff like that, where you can already see the dissatisfaction in American citizens because funds and investments aren't being put towards these things. It could be put towards that, to areas where it would be productive.
Are you kind of asking how investing into the private world would impact kind of the governmental?
Well, no, I was asking, he said they're gonna come in and invest this money, and then we give them a citizenship, but how do we check that? Is there somewhere
Yeah,
that?
I think it'd have to be like a verification process through the federal government instead of going through the federal government would be the best way to do it.
It looks like we're out of time according to the people in the back.
Questions can-
Well, we got
Yeah,
one
I
think we still have
more.
time.
The time is,
Yeah.
it's just.
One more quick one.
With regard to protecting culture against potential freedom of movement concerns and our culture being freedom or democracy, and then these wealthy individuals having interest in the country, is there any concern that these individuals would actually not be that interested in the country's outcome, but in their own outcome and the greater opportunity that we provide here, and perhaps using their power, money, and influence for restricting freedom of other individuals for their own work?
I think that's a huge, important question. As far as that goes, absolutely would highlight that in America, our culture is our equal opportunity. It is our freedom. That's the reason that people come, whether it's religious freedom, political freedom, economic freedom, that's why they come. So I would highlight that we, on balance, not for every person, but on balance, we have faith as Americans that generally people are gonna try to do the right thing, that generally that people are gonna help their fellow man. Generally speaking, not for every individual, but on net, this policy is gonna be a huge benefit because generally people are gonna wanna help the country they move to.
And even if they don't wanna help the country they move to, they could still do that technically from overseas or not being a citizen. So I don't think it gives them an advantage to, like, it doesn't change what they can do with their money if they're a citizen or not.
I can see what you're saying about self-interest, kind of clouding the American machine argument we're putting up here. But I would say that that's also a cultural thing is I think everyone has to act out of self-interest in America's both economy and culture anyways. So I think in certain ways that they would still be, how do you say, keeping the American way.
Yeah, it'd still be even. That's what the study on Jewish migration in the 90s found to Israel, was that no matter where they came from, there was there wasn't a higher amount of corruption in outside individuals compared to the people who were already there.
I think we're now out of time, so.
In 30 seconds.
Okay, Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys very much.
Very good.